Hi, my name is Joshua. I go by the username Shaggy Mummy everywhere, and this is the main contribution that I had to the VR Awards this year. And I'm just going to be doing a little bit of a breakdown, showing the different processes I use to actually create all the different effects. If you haven't seen the VR Awards, you can check out the live stream on the VR Awards YouTube channel, and you'll see the video that they have of this. So yeah, I'm just going to be doing a little bit of a breakdown on all the different processes I use to actually create this, starting with the animations. So what I ended up doing was I used a bit of a technique where you bake the different audio channels to an F curve. So what I have are these different sound players so that you can actually hear the whole song while you hit play. And what I can do is I can actually effectively solo each of these and only hear the ones I want to hear. But what this allows me to do is then map this animation to several other parameters within Blender itself and then bake that to a physical animation. So that's how the drivers work. We're going to go ahead and go to the visual bars. I used a different method. There's a plugin for Blender. The plugin I use is called Visualizer, and what it allows you to do is effectively import an audio file, and it will then create a template. All I did was I generated a bunch of bars, about 64 the default, and then I picked the 5 that seemed to be moving the most. And then I oriented them around the center so that you could get the different instruments. And so all I did was effectively plug the different audio drivers, the different tracks for all the different parts, the blend shapes. So what I did for the actual orb, the chandelier orb in the center, all the rotation is procedural. So you can see it's just a basic sine wave. Cool. But the way I actually did the deformations was those were using blend shapes. So what I have are these different parameters that you can affect and animate, and the way that was done is using the displace modifier. And I did several different versions of displacement. Yeah, so we have basis, and we have like a crackle texture, which I don't think I used, like a warped texture, which I also don't think I used, another version of the warp, sort of a blobby version, a blocky version, which you can kind of see like voxelized shapes. And then we have like a cones version, which kind of looks like circles indented. And I don't really think I used the last 3 because those were the ones that looked, at the time, most appealing. But so doing the animations with blend shapes as opposed to doing it with shaders or anything else was just a new technique. I did a lot of stuff with blend shapes for the VR Awards. The flowers I did were all animated with blend shapes. Now let's move on to the looping gyroscope. So this was the other thing. My brother really wanted to have something up in the sky that you could look at. And this was also procedurally animated. And all it was supposed to be is something visual that is constantly moving. You'll see it just loop right there. When everything aligns flat, that's when it loops. But right there. But yeah, so I wanted to have a seamless loop that could be animated the entire time and would persist before and after the actual music experience portion started. And then these are all just rotating using sine waves. Procedural stuff. And then these just continuously rotate around the entire time. And it's all seamless. You'll notice there's a bit of Z fighting here, and that's because there's actually 2 versions of the gyroscope. There's one version, and then there's another version of the dead planet. And originally in the animation, towards the end, the very climax of the animation, the center one actually scales up. And what you get is the visual indication of the star dying. Just like that. And I think I originally was going to try animating that with the material, but because this object was a looping animation, I couldn't do that. So effectively what I had instead was a smaller version of the planetoid that was part of this whole animation. So this thing was animated to be timed with the actual music, whereas the whole gyroscope in planetoid is a looping animation that goes continuously. Okay, so that's all for the animation. Let's move on to how I did the textures. So the planetoid is actually very basic. It's just a Voronoi noise material. Let's go to the shading tab. Yeah, procedural texturing is sort of my bread and butter. It's what I've played with the most when it comes to Blender, and it's sort of my happy comfort place. So with this guy, what we have are I have a basic noise generator that's kind of just for stuff, and then this is sort of like the sunspot lava texture. You'll notice the UV seams are absolutely terrible. It's because I didn't spend a whole lot of time on that. But then I have that mixing with a Voronoi texture over here, and that just sort of gives you the crackly look, and I defined that more. And when it's all mixed together, you get sort of this crackly planetoid surface. And then I bake this all to textures, and even still, you notice like the UV seams are pretty bad because it's an icosphere. But when it's actually in full motion and the texture's all baked, you don't even notice it, so it's not even that big a deal. And then for the gyroscope rings, so you'll notice it's a very, very small section. So it's a very simple geometry. I ended up modeling the whole ring, and then I just split it down into 1/8. So originally I did quarters, and then I did again. So all I have here is a mirror modifier, and it mirrors in all axes. So it mirrors in the z-axis, the y-axis, and the x-axis. And what that allows me is to only work with a little bit of geometry, and then everything else just loops and repeats. And the same can be said about the actual texture. So if I go to UV editing, you'll notice that it's a very small portion. And because it's so far away, you don't even particularly notice that the textures just loop and repeat. So the actual glow, I have like 2 different things, but 3 different materials, but I kind of all just baked it to one thing. So you have like the outer metal material, which is just a very simple metal shader, and then it's using the reflection map. I have the glowing material, which is just noise. And then I have the tech metal, which is another version of a Voronoi texture. Let me see. Yeah, so you can kind of get these weird angled shapes when you use the Voronoi if you change some of the parameters. And I have that all mixing together to do like a bump map and everything. And my brother really wanted to have gold accents, so I did that. So that's all baked to the texture as well. So I think that's it for the planetoid. Oh yeah, and then the actual, these blocks, these are just the same metallic shader. It's nothing special. Okay, so let's go to the actual animation now. So for the floor, I did a very similar tech metal approach to the gyroscope, where it's a Voronoi noise generator. And I'll get into how I actually modeled this soon. But yeah, you can see the glow effect is actually part of the same shader as well. So I have the same Voronoi noise, basically assigning colors to the different gray levels. So you have basically a gradient grayscale from black to white, and then this ramp just assigns different colors to each shade. And then that's being used to drive the glowing portions. The metal part is using, I believe, the same noise texture. Yeah, I have that as a bump just to kind of spice it up, make it look a little more interesting. Yeah, so I have like a couple different versions of Voronoi that I kind of mix together. But yeah, basically you generate this and you get a bunch of different panels and use that to drive different textures. It's all just procedural, but that's kind of my bread and butter, like I said before. And then it's quite glossy and metallic, so it's all using the reflection map to get sort of the lighting. For the actual final version, we ended up going with a matte cap shader. I don't have it set up exactly, but effectively what I did is I rendered out a version of this environment map to a matte cap texture instead of an environment, which would basically just be half of a sphere instead of the whole sphere. Okay, so that's how I did the floor materials. I already did the gyroscope. So the skybox. The skybox was also procedural, noticing a theme. If I actually go to world, you can see that here. And I did a sort of a combination of 2 different Voronoi noises, where I have one that's sort of the star pattern, and that's cranked down to be like speckled stars. And then I also have a larger one, which is more of the crackle pattern, which just sort of gives you these geometric shapes just kind of floating around. And then I assign those random colors based on another noise texture. And it's all mixed together. I just went for something kind of abstract and having bits of color and light to kind of reflect off of the metallic structure. That was the whole goal here. And then there's also some colors to the stars themselves. But I wanted to have a quick and dirty procedural light that would have been quite performant, because doing lighting with reflection probes is actually, I think, one of the more performant ways of doing it, rather than having physical pixel lights. And even then, it's just reflections, and it's not actually lighting. So yeah, you notice there's a lot of like spots of color everywhere, and that's really what I was going for. I just wanted it to be colorful, but not too bright. and just sort of interesting. So the actual orb itself is a very simple shader, actually. So all I have here is really a noise generator, and I have that going into a bump map, which gives it sort of the warped, wavy wrinkles. And then I have it also more contrasty going into roughness. And then it's just pure metallic. That's basically it. It was a very simple texture. I just wanted it to be kind of weird, mystical. And the thing is, it's orbiting so fast, or rotating so fast, and warping and deforming so much that you can't even really tell. But it's just there for looks. Okay, now I have the actual glowing bars and rings. This is also a very simple shader. I did 3 different versions, one for each color, but they're all effectively the same. Oh yeah, and then I also have the cone lights. Those are very simple, but we had to limit how much transparency we actually used on this project due to quest limitations, and so I couldn't do a bunch of transparency everywhere. So I had to pick and choose. So I did 2 main ones where I have one cone up here just to act as a sort of beacon light coming from the planetoid above. And that kind of just gives the impression that it's we couldn't do post-processing as well. So this was a way of faking the bloom effect that you would normally get with post-processing in VRChat and Unity. And then here I wanted it to be more like a hologram effect, like it was being projected. And so that's where this one comes into play. They're effectively the same, and if you actually look at the texture, do I have the texture? I do. You can see here that they're effectively the same thing, just slightly different color. And you see all the different other texture bakes. The other thing was I wanted to limit how many different textures we had. So, oh yeah, the particles. I forgot about those. So I have like these just kind of baked to textures, and all this baked as well. This is just the emission map. Okay, back to shading. That's how I did the different glowing things. It's a basic noise texture, crank the contrast, added color, and emission. That's it. That's that. That's how I did the other thing. Okay, let's actually go to the particles. I don't think I have the particles. Where are the particles? Temp particles. Here we go. There we go. So yeah, these were kind of underutilized in the actual animation, but unfortunately I couldn't do the same particle system that I did in Blender to be the same thing in Unity. But yeah, you get the idea. It's sort of just there to accent motion and have more color and movement, everything. That's that. Okay, so that's all for texturing. Let's go to the modeling. So the way I actually modeled the floor is probably the most interesting part. If I actually go into edit mode, you'll see that it's just a small cross section, and everything else was sort of derived from that. And this is a modeling technique where you're using a bunch of different modifiers to get more geometry out of something very simple. So if I actually hide all this, oops, you actually see that the base geometry is quite simple. And so this was all I had to work with. And so making small changes wasn't super hard. And then what it does is it's actually gonna pop out. So what it then happens is it is mirrored, so you get that reflection, and then it is then made into an array, so you get 6 sections. It's then wrapped around into a circle and effectively welded to make it one continuous mesh. So all that does is take all the vertices that are near each other and make them connected. And you'll see that just kind of affects the normals a bit and just makes it a little bit better. Planetoid was very simple. I think I covered this briefly. This is just icosphere, very simple. And then the rings themselves are also very simple. I did a very similar technique, except instead of doing the array and then the form, it's just mirrored. I went over that briefly. And then these, oh yeah, this was something very similar where I did I think I did a cylinder inset extruded deleted a bunch of stuff, and then just did a mirror modifier to make it real simple. And then the chandelier orb. This is, all, again, an icosphere. The rings are, I think they're just single plane toruses. No, I think it was just a cylinder that I scaled and extruded. Hold on. Yeah, it's just a ring. It's very simple geometry. And then, oh yeah, the blend shapes. So these are also animated using blend shapes. So I have one to scale in the X direction, one to scale in the Y direction, and then one to do sort of a warped sonic wave. And that sort of gives the impression that it's being affected by the audio rather than just scaling. Yeah, and then the bars. Again, the bars were done with the visualizer plugin, which I believe... Yeah, so that's in the scene. So this is a great plugin if you want to do like bar audio reactive animation. What it does is effectively import the audio several different times with different frequency filters and assign the scale, I believe it's the Z. No, it's the Y. So the Y direction scale is just animated based on the amplitude of the F curve, or the amplitude of the audio, which is baked to an F curve, which then bakes to a bunch of keyframes. So yeah, then the whole thing was exported as a couple different FBXs. I had one for the gyroscope loop, and then another one with the actual animation. I definitely want to explore this concept more and figure out a way of doing this sort of thing more, not necessarily procedurally, but with less steps. And hopefully do it all in Unity. So all I would have to do is build the template and systems within Blender, have a single, maybe not single, but a couple different FBX files that you could import in, and then maybe not with Udon, or it would have to be with Udon for VRChat at least. Have a way of monitoring the audio source within Unity to react to different frequencies and have those drive different parameters within the animation. Because doing just a simple looping rotation and stuff like that is quite easy to do. It could be like a few second looping animation, and then having the blend shapes affect the actual, have the deformation blend shapes be affected by the live playing audio. That's the plan in the future, at least. Hopefully. Yeah, I think I basically covered it all. So yeah, overall, the whole scene is less than 15,000 polygons. I made up for it a lot with texture detail and rotational animation and whatever else. But yeah, I had a lot of fun making this, and I look forward to doing more projects like this in the future.